Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 2 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels, and I'm glad that you are here with me. Those of you who are back after episode 1, I appreciate you coming back to take another listen. And those of you who are starting with episode number 2, I'm glad that you're here, but there is a previous one that you can check out as well, which will give you a little bit more insight as to how I ended up being a fan of footy. Well, there were a few things that I wanted to address in today's episode. And one of them, first off the bat, is the fact that I had a wonderful experience here recently with a Geelong fan who I consider a friend, although I've never met him in person. And this gentleman and I struck up a number of discussions online in message boards on Facebook, and turns out he is a supporter of the Cleveland Browns and the Cleveland Indians here in the state of Ohio, two teams that I support as well. So we worked out an agreement. We said, why don't we go ahead and share some of our gear with us? And Dave sent me a box of some wonderful stuff from the Cats team shop. I will have to fess up right now. I did not give him my size with regards to clothing, and I will state publicly right now, I did get the Guernsey on, but it was a little tight, but I did get it on, and I'm working towards getting it on so that when we have days at school, I'm a school teacher, and we will have kind of a team pride day, or wear the jersey of your favorite team. I can't wait to march in there wearing my Cats Guernsey, because I'll be the only one. So Dave sent me a Guernsey. I got a new coffee mug, actually 2 coffee mugs, both which I use quite a bit. A Patrick Dangerfield doll, I guess would be the best way to describe it, which I have prominently displayed right on the corner of my desk in my classroom. A new Cats pennant that's right alongside my 2017 team photograph of the Cats, as well as a number of other items that I'm utilizing, including the mouse pad that is right next to me on my desk. Well, I had been looking at trying to find things to send to Dave, and I did some online shopping, and it took me probably longer than it should have in order to find the things that I wanted to send. And I finally did send him a box that had 3 or 4, I think 4 shirts of the Cleveland Browns, the Cleveland Indians. One of them happened to be a shirt that was a Cleveland Indians shirt that looked just like the blue and white hoops that the Cats wear. I was thrilled that I found that one. I had it sent to me from Texas, and it's now been sent on to Australia. I sent along a couple of ball caps, some hats. I sent along a beer stein and some bobbleheads of some Cleveland Indians players. And one of the things that I truly enjoyed putting together for him was a binder of baseball cards and football cards. Now, I've been a collector my entire life. I'm not really active with it right now. I don't go out of my way to buy cards these days. But I did buy cards for my son as he was growing up. He's now 22 years old. And kept all the cards that I had, some of them going back into the 1950s, but most of mine starting in the 1970s. And I went through all of my cards, and there are over 100,000 of them. And I put together a binder of a little over 800 baseball and football cards. Many of them, most of them Cleveland Indians and Cleveland Browns, but the rest of them being Major League Baseball Hall of Famers and National Football League Hall of Famers. And I thought that was possibly the best thing that I could provide to give insight into the game, as those probably have never been seen before in Australia. And I could be wrong on that. So by all means, correct me if I'm wrong on that. So I just wanted to publicly say thanks to Dave, because his gift was terrific. My wife was ready to pinch my head off, though, when she found out the cost of shipping the box to Australia. Well, I told her that there's a good likelihood that I'll be sending another one in the not too distant future. And I have a couple of items that do have some weight to them. So hopefully she will not get too upset with me. But one of the things I really wanted to talk about today was something that, as a new fan to the game, I've really noticed. And it is so exciting to see, and so much fun to see happening with the way the game is embraced in Australia. That thing, if you will, that I noticed is the camaraderie that seems to exist between the supporters of teams in Australia and the teams themselves. There seems to be a genuine love affair between the fans of the team and the players, because while it may not be right to say that the players are so much more approachable than players in the National Football League or in Major League Baseball, it sure seems that way, because I spend a lot of time looking at social media and seeing how people interact with other individuals. And what I've come to notice, and I see this during the games as well, where the teams involve the fans, the supporters, holding up the banners before games, going around and shaking hands with them after the games, and just seeming to know that symbiotic relationship is important. That doesn't exist, to me, at least what I've seen in the National Football League or in Major League Baseball. And part of that, to me, is simply because in American sports, the athletes here, and I don't fault them for this, they're earning as much money as they possibly can, and I don't have a problem with people earning as much as they possibly can. But they seem to have almost priced themselves out of having to interact with the fans. I'm not sure if you understand what I mean with that, but there seems to be a chasm between the fans in baseball and in football, as opposed to what happens in footy in Australia. You have average baseball players who are not stars, who are making $2.5, $3, $4, $5 million a season. Now, as I said before, I don't begrudge anybody about that. Earn as much as you possibly can. That's fantastic. It's a market-based system. If that's what the owners are going to be willing to pay you, then by all means, take that. Now, what you may not know is that in baseball here in the United States, there is not a salary cap. Teams can spend as much as they want on salary. Now, there are some penalties if they go above a certain amount, but you have teams like the New York Yankees and the Los Angeles Dodgers who will spend, and the Boston Red Sox, really the three that jump out off the top of my head, who spend significantly larger amounts of money on their team salaries. So the Yankees may have a team salary combined of $225 million a year for the entire roster. But then a team like the Oakland Athletics or the Tampa Bay Rays, they might have a $40 million salary that they're paying their players. So there's a huge disparity. The NFL is much more like the AFL with regards to having a salary cap. So there is not as much disparity. Teams are spending approximately the same amount of money, but it's a huge sum here in the United States. And what gets me thinking that the camaraderie between the fans and the players is greater, and I'd love to hear stories from you on this, so by all means, shoot me an email at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. I would love to hear your thoughts on this and be able to report to other individuals about some of your ideas and your encounters. But I see photos all the time in message boards on Facebook, on Twitter, where people happen to be out for lunch somewhere in their community and they run into a player or two from their club. And there seems to be a much closer relationship. They seem to be much more approachable. Now, again, I could be wrong about that, but from what I've seen, it seems like the players really love the supporters. Now, I know there have been some horrible things that have come up recently with the treatment of players like Liam Ryan and racism and things like that. And the other gentleman, and I cannot remember his name, he retired before he should have, from what it sounds like. It was really before I was starting to watch the game. And he was pointing out that there was, to him, racism that was going on against the indigenous players. And that's terrible. That's horrible if that's happening. And unfortunately, there are people in every society that have that mindset. It's really too bad of a thing. But beyond that, just seeing that relationship between the fans and the players, it makes me as a sports fan extremely envious, because many of you, just in your daily lives, might have run into or encountered your favorite player or a retired player. And you've got that photograph of you and them on your wall. You've got an autograph, or you've got one heck of a story that you can tell your grandkids down the road as you go through life. So the camaraderie to me is just something that I believe is wonderful. And it's something that I wish we really had in our games here in the United States. But like I said, I think they've really priced themselves out of that. That maybe the players have started to think that they are superior. I don't mean athletically. I mean just superior to the rest of society. You know, we have players that play on my favorite football team, the Cleveland Browns. We have somebody that's driving a car that he had made in the team colors on the car, a bright orange car, and the hood ornament, the little medallion, if you will, on the front of the car, is actually a little statue of himself. You talk about being self-absorbed. It sure seems to be an awful lot of me. But again, I could be wrong on that. Okay, so the camaraderie thing, I believe, is absolutely wonderful. Okay, I really do. I think that makes the AFL superior to the NFL, to Major League Baseball. And I think probably even to the NBA as well, because in some cases those NBA athletes are making significantly larger salaries. I mean, we just had Major League Baseball players sign a 9-year contract for, I believe it was almost $250 million. That was with a B, not an M, a B. He's getting paid almost as much to play the game as some of the owners did when they bought the entire team not that long ago. But they're making huge amounts of money from television revenue, not even as much from ticket sales, but the fact that every team has their own TV channel and they're selling advertising there and they're making huge sums of money that way. Now, most teams don't have their own channel in football, but Major League Baseball, every team has their own dedicated channel that they're airing all of their games on. So as a Cleveland Indians fan, I can watch, out of the 162 game season, I think 155 of their games will be on there, and the other 5 or 6 might be on ESPN or on the Major League Baseball network. Heck, even one was on YouTube last year. There was one game on YouTube, and that was very awkward to watch a baseball game on YouTube when the people who were broadcasting the game spent more time talking about YouTube than they did about the baseball game. But enough about American sports here. Okay, I really wanted to just make the point that there is a disparity, in my opinion, between footy and American sports. Okay, one of the other things I wanted to bring up was to talk about, first of all, the US AFL announced this week that they're going to be holding their national tournament in October of next year, on October 10th and 11th in Ontario, California. And that's exciting. I saw that posted on the Supporters of US AFL/AFL website on Facebook, and have talked to a lot of people on there. Well, you know what I mean by talking on there, not like this. And I'm hoping to develop some good relationships with the people that are there, that I can maybe set up some interviews with those folks as well. And I'm going to be reaching out to you in the not too distant future again to try to get some people interested in conducting some interviews, because I would like this podcast to ultimately be something that most of it tends to be driven by people that I'm talking to, not necessarily me. Sure, I want to spend some time talking about my observations, but then I also want to be able to talk about the views that other people have, what they've experienced, their greatest moment watching footy, their biggest heartbreak. What are they looking forward to during the upcoming season? What went on last week or the previous week once the season gets rolling that left them frustrated or left them excited? But they had a discussion board on Facebook where they were talking about what can be done to try to introduce the game more readily here in the States. Now, sure, we have dozens of teams playing the game here in the States, But these are people who were already adults. Most of these people are in their 20s, 30s. There might be some in their 40s even that are playing. But how do we get this game introduced to younger kids here? I've been a public address announcer for a decade, and I did some coaching in football and baseball early on in my teaching career. And I've started to see a bit of a downshift, if you will, in terms of the number of kids that are playing American football in some schools. Not in every school, but in some schools. But there's been an uptick in the number of kids playing soccer. I've seen a lot more kids playing soccer than I have seen in a long time. Now, I have heard that there are some communities around the country that are holding camps and exhibitions, if you will, to show the game to younger kids, to try to spark that interest. Because, let's be honest, footy is an entirely different skill set than pretty much anything that happens here in the United States. Sure, there's kicking with soccer. There are some kids that are playing rugby. There's a minimal amount of kicking going on in the actual game of football, ironically enough, or what we call football. But just the simple fact that we have so many young kids that are looking for something to do. And this is a game that, in many cases, it's new to them. They've never seen it before. And there's a lot of aspects of this game that I think would be exciting. So they brought up, I thought, a great point on that message board online, on Facebook. How do we get kids excited about this? And they talked about how there was exhibitions that had taken place in camps, if you will, to try to introduce the game to kids in Seattle, and I believe in Los Angeles as well. Now, I live in Ohio, and there are 3 teams, the last I checked, that are playing in Cleveland. Actually, 4 teams. Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, and Cincinnati. And I believe there's one more that's getting ready to start. But this is a game that I think is ready to take off here, because there have been significant concerns with head injuries in American football. They are going out of their way to try to regulate or legislate, however you want to put it, tackling in American football. For decades, players would use the top of their helmet as kind of a spear, if you will, or a battering ram to tackle people. And it was leading to concussions. In some extreme cases, it was leading to paralysis. And while I have seen evidence that reports that soccer players actually suffer more concussions than American football players, it's a concern. And some people have shied away from it because of that. And footy might be a great solution to that problem. Now, we would have to modify the game here, especially at the younger ages, because if we're talking about playing at the high school level, we don't really have facilities in this country that have the footprints to put a piece of grass in place inside a stadium anyway. We've got lots of open area places where games can be played, but you're not going to have the seating area to get people to come and watch necessarily. You're not going to generate the concessions and that type of thing, getting people to come and sit and watch the games at that point in time. But I think it's definitely something that we should look into. Now, I put on that message board, I said, I've never actually seen a ball in my life. I've seen pictures of them. I've put them into my cart on the AFL shop website and a couple of other ones there, because I've been interested in actually having a ball so I can say, here's what it looks like. But I've never actually held a Sharon in my hands. It's not happened before. But I think we're ready for something like this here. But we'd have to modify the game. We'd have to maybe limit the number of players on the field. Getting 18 out there at a time probably would not work, especially at the younger ages. You might want to have fewer kids out there to allow the skill set to develop, allow them to have to cover smaller areas of grass, of ground, if you will. But I think that this is a wonderful opportunity to bring this game into the States. And if you're in Australia, and if you happen to be on Facebook, I would strongly suggest checking out the Supporters of US AFL/AFL supporters page. I think I said supporters there twice, actually. But if you put into the search bar Supporters of US AFL/AFL, it should pop up there for you. And there are some people who are working very hard at bringing this game to the United States, and they should be applauded for their efforts. There are teams all over the country. As you know, there are also teams playing all over the world as well. I've been following a number of different individuals and teams in the U.S., in Australia. I even believe I found a footy club that was playing in Colombia that I'm following now. I don't speak Spanish, so hopefully whatever they post will show up in English and I can figure out what it is that they were saying. I have to tell you, I was extraordinarily surprised to hear a couple of weeks ago that Alex Rance was stepping away from the game. Well, you know, if you listen to the first episode, that I am a Cat supporter. One can't help but acknowledge what a terrific player Alex Rance has been for a number of years. Now, of course, the Tigers were able to overcome his absence last year and still win the premiership, but I think they were still counting on him being able to come back and help them out this year. And to hear the stories that broke within the last day or so about his personal life, which I don't want to go into because I've only seen little postings online and I'm not wanting to speculate. Those things are very surprising to hear. Now, before I wrap up this evening, there were a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. First off, while most of the country of Australia is engrossed in the test matches going on right now between Australia and New Zealand, I am mercifully awaiting the end of the NFL season so that my beloved Cleveland Browns can go back to the drawing board yet again and try to put together a successful season. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm 56 years old right now, and I would actually like them to get their stuff together sometime in the next 15 to 20 to 25 years. That would be really nice. But again, before I go, while we're all caught up in the sports that interest us at home right now, the one we have in common, of course, is footy. We need to keep reminding ourselves that at the time I'm recording this, we're only 42 days away from the AFLW season beginning and the Crows defending their premiership. And I'll tell you what, I'm very excited to watch the AFLW matches this year. I started watching about 2 seasons ago, and it was amazing to see the improvement in the skill level. And I'm looking at that from the outside, still learning the game, but it looked as though the ability level and the expertise that many of the athletes was demonstrating improved tremendously from one season to the next, and I anticipate that happening again this year as well. And good footy is good footy. It doesn't matter who's playing it. Now, while that's 42 days off, we're 83 days away from Richmond getting ready to defend their title, their premiership. And let's be honest, they've got to be the front runners because they're a very quality team. And while I'm a Cats supporter and I'm hoping that they can make one more run to the premiership, they're going to have a lot of things fall into place for that to happen because they are getting up there in age a little bit. And some of the people they're depending upon are very much on the north side of 30. Now, of course, I'm really hoping that my favorite player, Nakia Cockatoo, is healthy through all of the training and comes out and just has a dynamic season. I'm sitting here looking at my Nakia Cockatoo button sitting on my desk that my friend that I mentioned to you earlier in the broadcast had sent to me. One last thing before I go. If you get an opportunity, I strongly suggest you take a listen to the One-Eyed Fan podcast, which you can find on both Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, and I'm sure other places as well. I found it on Spotify. And that's a Cats fan, Brian, and a friend of his that are doing that podcast. And as an American who's learning about the game, I truly enjoyed listening to the discussions that were taking place in the one episode that I've heard so far, because it was helping me to learn a little bit about the history of the game. And the gentleman that they were interviewing before, and I believe his name was Nixon, if I'm not mistaken, got into talking about his top 10 players and was working on compiling that list. And it was a fascinating hour. So I strongly encourage you to take a listen to that one. So I'm going to wrap up at this point right now, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to thank you for listening. And I hope that you'll come back. And I want to remind you that you can reach me and follow me on Twitter at @yank_on, or on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube at a yank on the footy. You can email me at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. And if you'd please consider subscribing to my podcast, I would greatly appreciate that. I would love to have you come back and listen again. As I'd mentioned earlier, I believe one of my goals is to start conducting interviews here with people who are fans of the game. Now, of course, I would love to interview someone like Patrick Dangerfield. I would love to interview Mason Cox, being an American player. I would love to interview some wonderful former players. But I would like to learn the history of the game from those of you who are listening. And while I was recording this, I was trading some direct messages on Twitter with some people who I'm trying to line up some interviews with. And again, I would love to hear from you. Feel free to shoot me an email at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. Again, you could follow me at Twitter at yank_on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. I would also love to get some feedback from you if I possibly could. And by that, I would love to hear from you on Twitter or through a review on the podcast hosting site that you're listening to right now, whether that be Spotify or Apple Podcast or Stitcher or whichever one you happen to have located me. And I'd love your honesty. I'm not going to ask for a 5-star. I'd love one. But until I've earned that, I don't think I necessarily should have one. Now, I'm hoping that you'll come back and give me an updated one if you like what you've heard later on. But I'm working to improve. I'm getting more comfortable with what I'm doing. I'm having fun with it. And that's the goal here, is to learn more about this game and to let you know that there are people on the other side of the planet that love your game. And we're so appreciative of you for sharing it with us. One of the other things that I would love to have happen would be that if any of you happen to have questions for me, things that you want to know about my experiences with footy or my life in general, I'd like to address those in upcoming episodes. So if you have a question for me about footy or why in the heck I chose to support the team I chose to support and not yours, or I chose yours, by all means, feel free to shoot me a message. Send me a message on Twitter. Shoot me an email at the email address that I mentioned earlier. I would love to hear from you and hear what you have to say as well, because this is intended to be a learning exercise for me. I want to learn not only what the people in the media and the athletes and people that we would typically hear from about sports, what they think. I want to know what your typical sports fan thinks, what their views are, why they love and live and breathe for the black, red, and white, or for the orange and white, or for the black and gold, or for the hoops, or for the purple and white. You get the idea. Why do you love your team? Those are the kinds of things I want to know. And I want to hear stories about why you have fallen head over heels for your team. What's frustrated you? What has excited you? What are you looking forward to in 2020? Because that's coming up very soon. So those are some of the things that I'm hoping to hear from you about. And I truly would appreciate you getting in touch with me if you have any questions or anything of that nature. It would be great to be able to get some feedback from you and to give you some feedback. Because quite frankly, I find myself in a bit of a unique position in my own house because there is nobody in my home that is a fan of the game. Well, my oldest child has graduated from college and is serving in the military. My youngest child is in her first year and is training to be a school teacher, I believe, like both of her parents. That may change. And she's never watched a game with me. My wife doesn't want to get caught up in another sport. I have turned her into a Cleveland Indians fan. She will sit down and watch games with me from time to time, or she'll watch them on her own. But she doesn't have any interest in watching footy. I can't get her to watch American football. So it is extraordinarily an uphill battle to get her to watch a sport from another country. Now, I tried, and one of the things that I did was I found a couple of websites online that had photographs of several dozen footy players at the beach or working out and that type of thing. I'm comfortable enough in my manhood to share those kinds of images with my wife, and if that is how I can get her to watch games, then so be it. When she first started watching Cleveland Indians games, she fell for one of the players on the team at that time, and that became her favorite player because he was cute. So I figured, what the heck, I would try that in this situation. Well, that didn't work out the way I had hoped. But I'm going to keep plugging along, and I'll try. And if this podcast takes off the way that I hope it does, and I get some steady listening, and people want to hear my point of view, and people want to talk to me about their views on the game, maybe she'll come around. I was hoping to watch a couple of old games during my break from school here at Christmas time, but the Watch AFL app website has not yet sent me my new login code for this year. I became an international member of the Cats this year, and with that came the season pass for the Watch AFL app. They said it was supposed to be sent out in December, and we are very close to running out of December as I'm making this podcast. Unfortunately, I had planned on having one of my friends come over who has started to show some interest in the game and has said that he in fact wants to come with me to Australia when I finally get there to watch some games. And we were going to watch a game from this past year, or maybe the year before that. I was going to pick one at random, and we were going to sit down and watch it. But unfortunately, I'm locked out of the Watch AFL app until I get my new code. Now, it's a great app. If you're here in the States, it is a must-have if you're a footy fan. We get one game a week on the Fox Sports channel, and that's it. I definitely want more than that. So it was worth the $129 to become an international member, because quite frankly, that was cheaper to become the international member and get the Watch AFL app than it was to get strictly the Watch AFL app the last couple of years. I wish I had checked into that a little bit more closely, because I would have liked to have had the app available along with all of the goodies that come from the club. Now, that hasn't arrived yet either, but with international shipping, I don't think that's going to be here anytime soon. I am going to go ahead and wrap this up now, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I thank you for listening to episode 2 of A Yank on the Footy, and I hope that you'll come back again, and I hope to have my first interview episode out very, very soon. Thank you. I want to ensure that I thank Joseph McDade for his music that I'm using as my intro and my outro music. Mr. McDade creates some fantastic music, and I'm using 2 of his pieces, one called Backplate and the other one called Elevation. You could find those pieces and many others at josephmcdade.com/music. That's josephmcdade.com/music. Mr. McDade, thanks again for your hard work and your wonderful musical pieces. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to give me a listen, and I truly hope that you'll come back again as I continue my journey to learn as much as I can about this beautiful and wonderful game. Because, while many of us are fans of our teams, deep down, we're fans of a game that we all love, and that's the game of footy. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for listening, and I ask that you share this podcast with your footy friends, and may your dribble kick never hit the post. I'll catch you later. This has been episode 2 of A Yank on the Footy. You can reach me at Twitter at @yank_on or on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at A Yank on the Footy. Or feel free to email me at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com.